The crash should have killed him. When the cargo freighter Aurora drift tore through the atmosphere of Taurus, every alarm in the cockpit screamed like dying metal. Fire crawled across the control panels. The hull vibrated so violently Marcus Hale thought the entire ship would tear itself apart before reaching the ground. He gripped the pilot controls with white knuckles. Come on, just hold together. The navigation system had died minutes ago. Engines were barely responding. The ship wasn't landing anymore, it was falling. Outside the cockpit window, the sky burned a violent orange as Taurus's desert storm swallowed the horizon. Marcus had flown through asteroid fields. He had outrun pirates. He had even survived a reactor leak once. But this? This was the worst situation of his career. Brace, he muttered to himself. The freighter slammed into the desert like a meteor. Sand exploded around the hull as the ship skidded across the dunes for nearly half a kilometer before finally grinding to a violent halt. Silence followed. Marcus sat there for several seconds, breathing hard. Then he slowly opened one eye. Still alive. He leaned back in the chair and laughed weakly. Good start. The cockpit smelled like burned wiring and overheated metal. Half the displays were black. The others flickered with warning signals. Marcus ran a quick diagnostic. Navigation, destroyed. Communications, offline. Main thrusters, barely functioning. Long-range beacon, melted. He groaned. Well, that's fantastic. He unstrapped himself and grabbed his survival pack. If the ship couldn't call for help, he'd have to survive until someone noticed his missing delivery. And on a world like Taurus, survival meant one thing. Water. Taurus was infamous among pilots. A desert planet with almost no liquid water anywhere on the surface. Even the local species fought wars over small underground reservoirs. Fortunately, Marcus wasn't a complete idiot. Hidden beneath the cargo hold was a Terran survival container, a classified emergency resource meant only for human deep space pilots. Inside it were several small capsules of ultra-purified hydrogen water, condensed and stabilized by advanced Terran technology. Each capsule could keep a human alive for days. On Taurus, it might be worth more than an entire starship. Marcus stepped outside the freighter. The desert wind greeted him immediately. Hot. Dry. Endless. Golden dunes stretched to every horizon. Jagged black mountains cut into the sky in the distance like broken teeth. The air shimmered with heat. The planet looked completely empty. Marcus sighed. Perfect place for a vacation. He walked back toward the ship and opened the hidden storage hatch. Inside the container sat the water capsules, clear metallic cylinders no bigger than a flashlight. Marcus picked one up carefully. Guess it's just you and me now. Then the ground shook. Marcus froze. At first he thought the ship's engines were collapsing. But the tremor came again. Stronger this time. The sand rippled across the dunes like something massive was moving beneath it. Marcus slowly turned. Okay, that's new. His suit scanner suddenly beeped. Warning, large biological mass detected. Marcus stared at the desert horizon. Something was coming. A shape appeared between the dunes. At first it looked like a moving rock formation. Then it stepped closer. And Marcus realized with growing disbelief that it was a person. A very large person. The figure staggered across the desert, nearly 3 meters tall, wrapped in broken black armor plates that looked like alien metal scales. Long silver hair whipped wildly behind her as the wind howled. She took another step. Then another. Then she collapsed into the sand about 20 meters from Marcus's ship. Marcus blinked slowly. Well, that's unexpected. His scanner beeped again. Species unknown. Size, extreme. Threat probability, 72%. Marcus stood there for a moment. He could simply walk back inside the freighter. Lock the doors. Pretend he hadn't seen anything. That would be the smart decision. The safe decision. Marcus sighed. Yeah. I'm definitely going to regret this. He walked toward the fallen figure. Up close, the giant alien looked even larger. Her armor was cracked and burned as if she had been in a massive battle. Deep cuts ran across her arms and shoulders. But the most striking thing was her face. She looked young. Too young to be a soldier. Her breathing was weak. Her lips were dry and cracked from dehydration. Marcus knelt beside her carefully. Hey, you alive? For a moment nothing happened. Then her eyes opened. They glowed faintly gold. And they immediately locked onto the metallic cylinder in Marcus's hand. Her voice came out weak and broken. Water. Marcus hesitated. That small capsule might be the only drinkable water for hundreds of kilometers. Without it, he might not survive long enough to be rescued. The alien girl looked at him again. Please? Marcus stared at the capsule. Then at her. Then back at the capsule. Finally he sighed heavily. Yeah, figures I'd do the stupid thing. He twisted open the container and carefully helped her lift it. The alien girl drank. At first slowly. Then desperately. The transformation was almost immediate. Color returned to her pale skin. Her breathing steadied. The trembling in her body faded. Marcus leaned back and crossed his arms. Well, that seems better. The alien girl lowered the container and looked at him with confusion. Human? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You speak Galactic Common? Yes. She studied him carefully. You gave water. Marcus shrugged. You asked. Her glowing eyes narrowed slightly. Why help enemy? Marcus blinked. Enemy? Yes. Your kind and mine, not allies. Marcus scratched the back of his head. Well, that sounds like a political problem. She stared at him silently. Marcus shrugged again. You looked like you were dying. The alien girl seemed to consider that answer. Then she slowly pushed herself to her feet. Standing, she towered over Marcus like a giant. But instead of threatening him, she bowed her head slightly. My name? Lyra of the Kayla clan. Marcus nodded. Marcus Hale. Human pilot. Professional crash survivor. For the first time, Lyra smiled faintly. Then she turned and began walking back into the desert. Marcus watched her disappear across the dunes. He shook his head. That was weird. He returned to the freighter and climbed inside. The long desert night passed quietly. Marcus slept. For a while. Until the alarms woke him the next morning. Every radar on the ship flashed red. Marcus sat up instantly. What now? He checked the external scanners. And froze. The horizon was moving. Hundreds of massive figures marched across the desert toward his ship. Marcus zoomed the camera. Armored giants. Warriors. At least 300 of them. They surrounded the freighter in complete silence. Marcus swallowed slowly. I knew that water was going to cause trouble. Marcus Hale woke to the sound of alarms screaming through the freighter. At first he thought it was the ship finally giving up. The Aurora drift was barely holding together after the crash. Half the systems were broken, the engines were unreliable, and the power core sounded like it might explode if someone looked at it wrong. But this alarm was different. It was the proximity scanner. Marcus sat up instantly in the small bunk inside the freighter. What now? The console near the wall flashed bright red. Multiple massive life forms detected. Marcus rubbed his eyes and walked to the control panel. Please just be a herd of something. He tapped the external camera feed. The screen flickered to life. Marcus froze. The desert outside his ship was filled with movement. At first it looked like the dunes themselves were shifting. Then he realized the shapes were marching. Hundreds of them. Massive armored figures moving across the sand in perfect formation. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. Oh. The scanner began counting. Life forms detected, 87. The number kept climbing. 134. 201. Marcus whispered slowly. That's a lot. The number stopped at 300. 300 enormous figures surrounded the crashed freighter from every direction. Marcus quickly zoomed the camera. His stomach tightened. They were warriors. Each one stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in heavy alien armor made from dark metallic plates. Their helmets had glowing slits where eyes should be, and each warrior carried a weapon the size of a small tree. Spears. Axes. Bladed staffs that crackled faintly with energy. Marcus grabbed the side of the console. Okay. Not great. The warriors stopped about 50 meters away from the ship. Then they spread out, forming a perfect circle around the freighter. Marcus whispered quietly. They're surrounding me. The scanner beeped again. The soldiers didn't attack. They just stood there, watching. Marcus sighed and reached under the console. He pulled out his emergency pistol. It was a compact Terran defense weapon designed for survival situations. Against normal threats, it worked well. Against 300 giant alien warriors, it would do absolutely nothing. Marcus still held it tightly anyway. Better than nothing. Outside, the ground trembled as the warriors began striking their weapons into the sand. Boom. 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 The sound echoed across the desert like thunder. Marcus flinched. What are they doing? Then the warriors suddenly moved. The circle opened. A path formed through the army. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. Someone was walking toward the ship. A tall figure stepped forward. Silver hair. Dark armor. Marcus blinked. Wait. He zoomed the camera further. The image became clear. It was her. The alien girl from yesterday. Lyra. Except now she looked completely different. Her damaged armor was gone. In its place she wore polished silver plates decorated with glowing symbols. A long cloak flowed behind her as the desert wind pushed across the dunes. But what shocked Marcus the most wasn't her armor. It was what the warriors did as she passed. They bowed. Every single one of them. 300 massive alien warriors lowered their heads as Lyra walked between them. Marcus slowly lowered his pistol. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Lyra approached the freighter calmly. She stopped just a few meters from the ship's ramp. Marcus hesitated for a moment. Then he sighed. Well, hiding probably won't help. He pressed the hatch controls. The freighter's ramp slowly lowered with a loud mechanical groan. Marcus stepped outside. The desert wind immediately whipped across his jacket. And 300 glowing alien eyes turned toward him. Marcus raised one hand slightly. Hi. No one moved. The army stood perfectly still. Lyra stepped forward. When she stopped in front of Marcus, she towered over him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lyra smiled faintly. Human Marcus Hale. Marcus blinked. You remember my name? Yes. Her glowing golden eyes studied him carefully. You saved my life. Marcus scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Yeah, about that. Lyra turned toward the army behind her. She raised one hand. Instantly the warriors lifted their massive weapons. Then they slammed them into the sand. Boom. The impact shook the ground. Marcus nearly jumped out of his boots. Lyra looked back at him. You must understand something. Marcus folded his arms nervously. I'm guessing this is the part where I accidentally insulted your culture. Lyra shook her head. No. She spoke clearly. You gave water to Lyra of the Kayla clan. Marcus nodded slowly. Right. Then she added something that made his brain completely stop. Daughter of the Kayla War Queen. Marcus stared at her. What? Lyra tilted her head slightly. You saved a princess. Marcus closed his eyes and rubbed his face. Of course I did. Lyra watched him with curiosity. You do not seem pleased. Marcus sighed deeply. I just gave you a drink of water. Lyra shook her head. No. Her voice became serious. You gave life. Marcus opened his mouth to respond. But Lyra raised her hand again. And something even stranger happened. Behind her, all 300 warriors dropped to one knee. The desert shook as their armor struck the sand. Marcus stared at the army kneeling around his ship. His jaw slowly dropped. Lyra looked at him calmly. Human Marcus Hale. He looked back at her. Yes? Her voice carried across the silent desert. You are now under the protection of the Kayla clan. Marcus blinked several times. Protection? Lyra nodded. These warriors came because of you. Marcus looked around at the massive kneeling soldiers. Let me get this straight. He pointed at the army. They're not here to kill me? Lyra shook her head. No. Marcus exhaled slowly. Well, that's a relief. Then Lyra added one more sentence. They are here to serve you. Marcus froze. I'm sorry, what? The warriors lowered their heads again. Lyra spoke proudly. You saved our princess. Marcus looked at the kneeling alien army. Then at his broken freighter. Then back at Lyra. He sighed heavily. I really need to stop helping people. Marcus Hale stood in the middle of the desert, surrounded by 300 kneeling alien warriors, and tried very hard not to panic. The wind howled across the dunes, lifting waves of sand around the crashed freighter. The morning sun burned bright above Tauris, casting long shadows across the silent army. Marcus looked around slowly. 300 armored giants. All kneeling. All staring at him. He rubbed his temples. I definitely hit my head during the crash. Lyra stood beside him, calm and proud in her silver armor. You are confused, she said. Marcus gave her a look. Confused? I woke up this morning to find an alien army outside my ship. Lyra tilted her head slightly. Yes. Marcus pointed at the kneeling warriors. And they're bowing to me. Yes. Marcus spread his arms. And apparently they're here to serve me. Yes. Marcus stared at her for several seconds. Then he sighed. Okay. I'm going to need an explanation. Lyra nodded. That is fair. She turned slightly toward the warriors. When she raised her hand, the entire army stood up at once. The sound of 300 armored giants rising together echoed across the desert like distant thunder. Marcus swallowed. Still not used to that. Lyra began walking toward a nearby dune. Marcus followed her cautiously. The warriors remained behind, standing silently around the freighter. When they reached the top of the dune, Lyra stopped and looked out over the endless desert. This world is called Taurus, she said. Marcus nodded. Yeah, I figured that part out. Lyra gestured to the dunes. Taurus was not always like this. Marcus raised an eyebrow. No? Long ago, she said, Taurus had oceans. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Oceans? Yes. Her voice grew quieter. But the oceans died. Marcus frowned. Dried up. Lyra nodded slowly. Our sun changed. The storms grew stronger. The rivers vanished. Marcus looked across the endless dunes again. Rough place to live. Lyra's glowing eyes watched the horizon. Our people survived by fighting. Marcus folded his arms. Let me guess. Fighting over water. Lyra looked at him. Yes. She knelt and picked up a handful of sand, letting it fall slowly through her fingers. On Taurus, water is life. Marcus nodded. That's true on most planets. Lyra shook her head. You do not understand. She looked directly into his eyes. Here, water is sacred. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Sacred. Yes. Lyra stood up again. In Kala law, there is a rule older than our oldest cities. Marcus waited. If someone gives water to a dying Kala. She paused. They become clan-bound. Marcus blinked. Clan-bound? Lyra nodded. That person becomes protected by the clan they saved. Marcus pointed toward the army near the freighter. So those 300 giants. Lyra smiled slightly. They are your shield now. Marcus stared at her. You're serious? Yes. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. This is insane. Lyra seemed confused. You saved my life. Marcus shrugged. I gave you a drink. Lyra shook her head. No. Her voice carried a strange weight. You gave water, when you believed I was your enemy. Marcus opened his mouth to argue. Then stopped. She wasn't wrong. Yesterday, his scanner had clearly labeled her as a potential threat. He had no reason to trust her. And yet, he had still handed her the water. Lyra studied him. Why? Marcus looked away toward the horizon. I don't know. He shrugged. You looked like you needed it. Lyra was silent for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. That is why my warriors kneel. Marcus sighed. I still feel like this is way too much for one bottle of water. Lyra suddenly smiled. Human Marcus Hale. Yes? You have not yet seen Kala gratitude. Marcus frowned. That sentence worries me. Before Lyra could answer, one of the warriors near the ship raised a hand and shouted something in a deep alien language. Lyra turned immediately. Marcus followed her gaze. The warrior pointed toward the distant mountains. Marcus squinted. What is that? At first he thought it was a storm cloud. Then he realized the shapes were moving. Small black dots appeared high in the sky. Dozens of them. No. Hundreds. Marcus's ship scanner suddenly screamed inside the freighter. He ran back to the ramp and checked the console. His stomach dropped. Orbital contact detected. Multiple warships entering atmosphere. Marcus whispered slowly. Oh, that's not good. Lyra stepped beside him. Her expression had changed. The calm princess was gone. Now she looked like a warrior. Our enemies, she said quietly. Marcus looked up at the sky again. Dozens of dark shapes burned through the atmosphere like falling meteors. What enemies? Lyra spoke a single name. The Drexa Empire. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Every pilot in the sector knew that name. The Drexa were conquerors. They didn't negotiate. They didn't share territory. They invaded worlds and stripped them for resources. Marcus looked at the 300 warriors gathered around the ship. Then at the massive fleet descending from orbit. Please tell me this isn't your entire army. Lyra shook her head slowly. No. Marcus exhaled in relief. Good. Then she added quietly. This is only the escort. Marcus blinked. Escort? Lyra pointed toward the burning sky. More ships are coming. Marcus stared at the approaching fleet. Hundreds of warships were entering Taurus's atmosphere. His broken cargo freighter suddenly felt very small. Marcus crossed his arms. So let me guess. Lyra looked at him. You want my help? Lyra's golden eyes met his. You gave water to a dying Kayla. Marcus sighed. Yeah. She spoke softly. Will you help us again? Marcus looked at the sky. Then at the 300 warriors surrounding his ship. Then at Lyra. Finally he smiled slightly. Well? He cracked his knuckles. Humans are pretty good at fighting unfair wars. The sky above Taurus began to burn. Marcus Hale stood on the ramp of his damaged freighter and watched streaks of fire rip across the atmosphere. One after another, enormous shapes pierced the clouds as alien warships descended toward the desert world. They looked like falling stars. Except stars didn't arrive in hundreds. Marcus folded his arms. That's a lot of ships. Lyra stood beside him, her silver armor reflecting the blazing light from the sky. The calm expression she carried earlier had hardened into something colder. A warrior's face. They have come sooner than expected, she said. Marcus glanced at her. You were expecting them? Yes. Great, Marcus muttered. Would have been nice to know before I gave away my water. Lyra ignored the joke. The Drexa Empire has hunted my people for many cycles. Marcus watched the ships descend lower. They were massive. Long, blade-shaped vessels covered in dark armor plating. Blue engine trails cut across the orange sky as they slowed their descent into Taurus's atmosphere. The scanner inside Marcus's ship began counting. Warship contacts, 117. Marcus whistled quietly. Yeah, 300 warriors suddenly doesn't feel like a lot. Behind them, the Kayla soldiers began preparing for battle. Massive weapons were lifted. Armor plates locked into place. Deep war chants echoed across the desert. Marcus turned around to watch them. For a moment he forgot how enormous they were. Each Kayla warrior looked like a walking fortress. 3 meters tall. Broad shoulders. Weapons capable of crushing vehicles. But even they seemed small compared to the warships filling the sky. Marcus scratched his chin. So, what's their plan? Lyra looked at him. The Drexa do not negotiate. Marcus sighed. Of course they don't. They conquer. Marcus nodded slowly. That tracks. Lyra continued. They will land armies. They will take our water reserves. They will enslave our people. Marcus glanced back at the sky. One of the warships roared overhead, casting a massive shadow across the dunes. The ground shook as it passed. Charming guys, Marcus said. Lyra's voice was quiet but firm. The Kayla clan will fight. Marcus looked at the 300 warriors. They were fearless. Ready. But Marcus had seen wars before. And he knew the truth. 300 warriors couldn't stop a fleet. He leaned against the ship's ramp. So be honest with me. Lyra looked at him. Do you actually think you can win this? For the first time, she hesitated. Then she answered honestly. No. Marcus appreciated that. Good. I prefer honest allies. Lyra tilted her head. Then why do you remain here? Marcus looked up at the sky again. Warships were beginning to circle the desert region. Scanning. Searching. Soon they would detect the freighter. Marcus shrugged. Well, technically I'm stranded. Lyra seemed confused. You cannot leave. Marcus pointed to the ship. Half the engines are dead, the navigation system is fried, and the communication array melted during the crash. Lyra considered that. So you are trapped. Marcus nodded. Pretty much. She studied him carefully. Then helping us is dangerous. Marcus laughed softly. Lyra, I'm already standing under an alien invasion fleet. He gestured to the sky. I think we passed dangerous about 10 minutes ago. Lyra stared at him for a moment. Then she nodded once. You are a strange human. Marcus grinned. I hear that a lot. Another warship screamed across the sky. This one slowed as it passed overhead. Marcus noticed something new. It's scanning. Lyra looked up. Yes. Marcus's smile faded. Which means they'll find us soon. The Kayla warriors had noticed it too. Several of them raised their massive spears toward the sky, growling in anger. Marcus walked into the freighter and checked the sensor panel again. The screen blinked rapidly. Enemy scanning signal detected. Marcus muttered quietly. Yep, That's bad. Lyra stepped into the freighter behind him. What is happening? Marcus pointed to the console. They're mapping the surface. Lyra frowned. They search for our settlements. Marcus nodded. And they'll eventually notice the crashed human ship surrounded by 300 giant aliens. Lyra was silent. Marcus leaned back in the pilot chair. Well, hiding is out. Lyra crossed her arms. We will fight. Marcus glanced at the army outside. They will die. Lyra did not argue. She already knew. Marcus tapped the damaged control panel thoughtfully. The ship's systems flickered. Engines damaged. Weapons offline. Navigation destroyed. But one thing still worked. The plasma reactor. Marcus slowly smiled. Lyra noticed. Why are you smiling? Marcus stood up. Because humans are very good at doing stupid things with broken machines. Lyra watched him carefully. What are you planning? Marcus walked toward the cargo bay. Well, he said casually, if the Drexa fleet wants to conquer Taurus. He opened a maintenance panel and began pulling wires loose. Maybe we should give them a very bad first impression. Lyra stepped closer. You cannot fight a fleet with one broken ship. Marcus grinned. You'd be surprised what humans can turn into a weapon. Outside, another Drexa warship began descending toward the desert. Its engines roared like thunder. Marcus cracked his knuckles. All right. He looked back at Lyra. Let's scare an empire. The Drexa fleet expected an easy conquest. From orbit, Taurus looked defenseless, nothing but endless desert, scattered mountain ranges, and a few primitive settlements hidden beneath the dunes. Their sensors detected no advanced defenses, no planetary shields, no orbital cannons. Just a handful of surface life forms. And one small crashed human freighter. To the Drexa commanders, it was nothing. Below, on the surface, Marcus Hale stood inside that nothing. The cargo bay of the Aurora Drift looked like a disaster zone. Panels were ripped open. Wires hung from the ceiling. Several parts of the reactor housing had been removed and placed across the floor. Marcus lay half inside an open maintenance hatch with a welding tool clutched in his hand. Sparks flew as he connected another cable. Lyra stood nearby, watching with growing confusion. Human Marcus. Marcus grunted. Yeah? What exactly are you doing? Marcus slid out from under the panel and wiped sweat from his forehead. I'm improvising. Lyra looked around the damaged ship. You are destroying your own vessel. Marcus shook his head. Nope. He tapped the side of the reactor housing. I'm upgrading it. Lyra tilted her head. This ship is barely functional. Marcus smiled. Exactly. He stood and walked toward the cockpit controls. You know what humans do when something is broken? Lyra folded her arms. No. Marcus grinned. We make it explode. Lyra stared at him. That does not sound helpful. Marcus pointed toward the sky through the cockpit window. The Drexa fleet had grown even larger. More warships were arriving. Hundreds of dark vessels hovered in the upper atmosphere now, scanning the planet and preparing to deploy invasion forces. Marcus tapped the radar. They think this world is helpless. Lyra nodded. They are wrong. Marcus smiled. Let's prove it. Outside the freighter, the 300 Kala warriors had gathered in a defensive circle around the ship. Massive weapons were planted into the sand. Armor gleamed in the burning sunlight. They watched the sky with silent determination. One of the Drexa warships suddenly broke formation. It began descending toward the desert. Marcus noticed immediately. Here we go. Lyra stepped beside him. They have found us. The warship grew larger as it dropped lower through the atmosphere. Its engines roared like thunder. The shadow of the vessel stretched across the desert as it approached the crashed freighter. Marcus checked the reactor panel. Energy levels were rising. The entire ship vibrated slightly. Lyra frowned. Your vessel is unstable. Marcus nodded. Oh, extremely. He adjusted another control. The reactor whined louder. Lyra looked concerned. It may explode. Marcus shrugged. That's the idea. The Drexa warship slowed about 2 kilometers away. A massive scanning beam swept across the desert. It passed over the Kala warriors. Then the freighter. Inside the cockpit, Marcus's console beeped. Targeted scan detected. Marcus chuckled. They noticed us. Lyra looked at the console. What happens now? Marcus leaned back in the pilot chair. Well, they'll probably send soldiers. As if on cue, the underside of the warship opened. Large dropships began detaching. Lyra turned toward the army outside. The invasion begins. Marcus cracked his knuckles. Not yet. He pressed a switch. The Aurora Drift's engines roared to life. Outside, the freighter suddenly lifted a few meters above the sand. The Kayla warrior stepped back in surprise. Lyra looked at Marcus. I thought your ship could not fly. Marcus grinned. It can't. The engine screamed louder. The entire ship vibrated violently. Warning lights flashed across every panel. Lyra suddenly understood. You are overloading the reactor. Marcus nodded. Yep. Lyra's eyes widened. That will destroy the ship. Marcus shrugged. Probably. The reactor core began glowing bright blue. Energy surged through the ship's systems. But Marcus wasn't directing it toward the engines. He redirected it toward the plasma exhaust system. Lyra watched the readings climb. What are you doing? Marcus pointed at the sky. Turning this cargo freighter. The reactor screamed as it absorbed more power. Into the biggest plasma cannon Taurus has ever seen. Lyra's eyes widened. The Drexel warship suddenly detected the power spike. Its scanners reacted immediately. But it was too late. Marcus slammed his hand on the firing switch. Say hello to human engineering. The ship released the entire reactor charge at once. A massive beam of blue plasma exploded from the freighter's engines and shot directly into the sky. The blast crossed the atmosphere in seconds. And slammed straight into the Drexel warship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the warship exploded. The shockwave rippled across the sky as the massive vessel shattered into burning fragments. Dozens of smaller Drexel ships scattered instantly. Panic spread through the fleet. On the ground, the Kayla warriors stared upward in stunned silence. Lyra slowly turned toward Marcus. You destroyed it. Marcus leaned back in his chair casually. Yep. Lyra looked back at the burning wreckage falling from the sky. Then at the tiny human pilot sitting inside the broken freighter. You are terrifying. Marcus shrugged. Humans specialize in creative problem solving. Outside, the Kayla warriors raised their massive weapons into the air. They slammed them into the sand in unison. Boom. 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 The desert echoed with victory. High above Taurus, the Drexel fleet began retreating. Marcus watched the fleeing ships and smiled. Then he leaned back and sighed. Well? He looked at Lyra. That was fun. Lyra shook her head slowly. Across the galaxy, a new story would soon spread. A strange legend. Never underestimate a human pilot. Especially one carrying water.